This is episode 92 with Charlotte Moncrieff.
Welcome to the Quarter Life Comeback Podcast, the show that empowers you to become the hero of your life's journey. With your host, Bryan Teare.
Everyone is on their own road. What is up, everyone? This is your host, as always, Bryan Teare, and welcome back to another episode of the Quarter Life Comeback Podcast. And those were the wise words of this week's guest, Charlotte Moncrieff. Now, before we get into the episode with Charlotte, a shout out to our sponsor. It is Rooster, the awesome alarm clock app that allows you to wake up to whatever it is that you choose. So there's no more snoozing on that boring alarm clock app that you've got way too used to these days. But you can choose inspiring channels, news headlines, sports reports, meditation tracks, and so much more, including voice notes from friends and family. You can check that out on the App Store or the Google Play Store, and that is Rooster Alarm and Audio Treats. Now, on to this week's episode with Charlotte. And Charlotte is the editor-in-chief of the 20 Mile Club, which is a site that encourages readers to realize the various entrepreneurial opportunities available, while also allowing them to see that they're not alone in whatever stage they're in their 20s. After graduating university, Charlotte assumed that she'd simply have to choose between different job offerings, but quickly realized that things don't quite happen that easily. After a conversation with a stranger in which she tried to look more impressive than her reality really showed, Charlotte decided to create a platform which helped others navigate this stage of their lives. She quit her job, left London, reduced her living expenses, and took a part-time job, which allowed her to build the 20 Mile Club in her spare time. The site's primary goal is to seek out and interview entrepreneurial and innovative 20-somethings in order to inspire and help others understand the steps that these 20-milers have taken in order to achieve their success. Now, in this episode, you're going to learn how to start a passion project while still paying the bills, dealing with friends and family who don't understand your decisions, how to deal with naysayers and find others who believe in you, advice for new entrepreneurs, how to know if an idea is worth pursuing or not, and why doubt is completely normal, and how to deal with it. As always, you can get the links and resources we mentioned in this episode at bryanteare.com/092. But for now, guys, let's go hang out with Charlotte. Welcome back, everyone, and a big welcome to today's guest. I'm excited to be speaking to Charlotte Moncrieff. Charlotte, welcome to the Quarter Life Comeback.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Did I get that right?
You got that completely right.
All right, perfect. Check one here. Yeah, Charlotte, I'm excited to be bringing you on the show today. We've connected a couple of times via email. I can't actually remember how we initially got in contact. I think it might have been through Tegan. But for the people who are listening who don't know who you are and what it is that you do, why don't you tell us a bit about your quarter life story?
Sure. So I set up an online platform last year called the 20 Mile Club. And essentially that all happened because a couple of years ago, when I left university, I very naively assumed I was going to be inundated with job offers. Anyway, that didn't happen. I was sofa surfing in London. And I was, it's like that very weird time where half my friends had jobs and half of them didn't. And you'd ask your friends that had jobs and you'd be like, how is it? Like, how's it going? And they'd turn to you and they'd say, oh, it's so great. I've got such purpose now. And you'd be like, shit, I haven't got a purpose. I'm lying on a sofa and I have no idea what I'm doing with my life. And, this one time I was walking to the pub with a guy I didn't really know, and we were kind of part of a wider group of people. And he was asking me how everything was going. And we ended up having this really fake conversation where I told him everything was like absolutely amazing. And then I'd ask him how it was going. And he was like, oh, yeah, it's going so well. I reckon I'm going to get a job any day now. And eventually I just looked at him and I said, can I ask you a question? And he said, yeah, sure. And I just said, do you ever cry? And he literally looked at me and was like, I have a cry at least once a week. And it made me laugh because I was like, so do I? So that was kind of the initial seed of the 20 Mile Club because, we interview people who've left the confines of a 9 to 5, and then we do business and lifestyle. And essentially our kind of like tone of voice is very reassuring. It's very satirical. It can like laugh at, kind of strips back any pretenses that are there and are so common with 20 somethings.
Yeah, I love that. And if people haven't checked it out, I'll put a link in the show notes. And you hit the nail on the head about, the language and the tone. It feels like you're speaking to a mate at the pub, like you mentioned was the birth of the whole thing. And I can relate to, being in that phase of thinking that things are going to be cool. I was about 25, so 3 years ago now. And I was at my own birthday party, and all my friends were saying how, work sucks. And so this was the side that, we all had jobs, but people were just unhappy. And they'd kind of written it off and accepted that, well, maybe this is what the working world is like. And, I won't go too far into the story, but that's when I realized, things don't have to be this way. And that was kind of the turning point for me. And what happened since then, since that conversation and being without work, how did you go forward from there?
So I'm not going to lie, if you guys are hoping for me to tell you a very glamorous story, it's going to start off rather unglamorously, and I had to do a lot of hustling to kind of get to where I am now. So essentially, when I set up the 20 Mile Club, I was actually in a full-time job in London, hating life, as in I could not have hated a job more. But as we were doing the 20 Mile Club, it was beginning to get traction. We were beginning to get more kind of emails from people wanting to get involved, really relating to our content. And so it kind of came to that point where I was just like, I need to just, bite the bullet and find a job in which I can kind of do both. Not where I'm exhausted in the evening, so I can't, give it some proper time. So I ended up quitting my job 6 months later, having launched the 20 Mile Club, and I moved to the middle of nowhere and became a live-in nanny. So suddenly I was taking these 2 boys to school every morning, but it allowed me to work on the website for 6 to 7 hours at a time, and then I'd have to pick the boys up and do all the things that come with being a live-in nanny, and shower, bathe them, and get them dinner and whatnot. So it was very unglamorous, but it was the only job I could kind of find in which I could do both. So I did that for about 4 or 5 months, and then as of this year, I started going into freelance copywriting, being able to juggle the two because we kind of lifted off the ground a bit more, and now we've just gone into events. So it has been a slow burn, but I think it's going to be quite exciting for us.
Yeah, that's amazing. And the connection did cut out a little bit there, but I think we got all of it. And
Okay, great.
what I love there is that, kind of like that first conversation you had, if you'd spoken truthfully, is that it wasn't like such a super sexy story, but you did what had to be done. And I think there's a big lesson in that, is that we just look at Instagram and see these entrepreneurs are like 24 years old and they're making like thousands of dollar proposals and deals and that kind of thing. Whereas that's probably the 1% of people out there. And most of them, if you got to know them or could see behind the scenes, they're probably working side hustles or 9-to-5s and then busting their guts after hours. And I love that you knew what it was you wanted to create, at least initially. And, you kind of saw, okay, well, this is what I need to do. And accepted that that's not a permanent place for you to be. It's just what you had to do in that moment.
It was super unsexy. And do you want to know the worst bit about it? Was bumping into an ex-boyfriend and him asking me what I was doing with my life and me having to tell him I was a live-in nanny. And I think his kind of jaw just dropped, and he was like, "You're a live-in nanny," and he said to me, "Are you even living in London?" And then I had to, reveal that I wasn't even living in London. I was kind of living in the middle of nowhere. But I tried to explain that it was a kind of short-term solution to a long-term goal. Mm-hmm. And trying to explain that to friends and family, especially when an idea hasn't taken off. And I think a huge problem also is a lot of people, when they look at things that have really taken off, they don't realize that actually there is a lot of grafting involved, and it's only really until ideas kind of take off do they then say, oh, he had to really hustle and try hard and X, Y, and Z. But when you're in the hustling stage, or you're in the kind of grafting stage, and it's very unglamorous and nothing you've been doing has perhaps come into like its element yet. It's very hard for friends and family to perhaps kind of see it from your point of view and support what you're trying to do. I think they just think you're a bit crazy.
Exactly. And what I wanted to bring up there too is it's funny that when we hear success stories, and the first one that comes to my mind is because I'm reading one of his books now, is Tony Robbins. Obviously, like almost everyone in the world knows Tony Robbins. And he came from a really rough family and worked like 2 night jobs as a teenager just so that his family could have food. And when we hear stories like that, we admire it so much and we're like, wow, that's amazing. But then we don't want to go through that ourselves. We want everything to kind of be this like yellow brick road and, like no failures along the way. That's a strict no-no. But I think that's just part of the journey is going through those setbacks and saying to yourself, like, how badly do I want this? Am I prepared to see this through? And it's almost like taking one temporary step back so that you can take 2 steps forward. That's the way that I kind of see that. And what would be your advice for people who are maybe going this route, whether they started in a traditional job or not, and now they're facing some sort of criticism or difficulty from friends and family?
I think, to be honest, if you know in your gut that you're doing something that's going to make you happy, or you know that what you're going to be doing is a means to an end, I think you just have to stick to your guns. And, regardless of how many people told me I was crazy or, tried to reason, you're wasting your time and X, Y, and Z, I just stuck to my guns and I said, I'm going to do this. And it's going to help me get to my end goal. And I did. And, another thing I would say is, okay, there's going to be a lot of noise, negative noise, but there are also people who are so willing to talk. And if you find them and you ask them for help, they will give it to you. Mm-hmm. So, I think those 2 things go hand in hand. Listen to your gut, and just talk to as many positive people who can help you get to where you're trying to go. Just almost don't listen to kind of the negative noise, because there will be some.
It's something that I've done recently, is having to ask myself, like, are these relationships really serving me? And, in a loving way, kind of spending less time invested in them. And where are you at now? Like, are you still doing some freelance work now? Is 20 Mile Club your full-time gig? What does that look like?
So I'm still freelancing at the moment, but I now work with a lot of startups. So when they're at the beginning stages, I help with all their content decks and their pitching and getting that first tone of voice right, because it's so important. Mm-hmm. The 20 Mile Club has become a even bigger part of my life now. We've started doing these events. So as of next year, we're going to be doing, with any luck, we're going to be doing an event every other month, and in between those months we're wanting to do premium workshops. So we'll collaborate with a company, and it'll be a company that young professionals are really interested by, really want to know whether it's something they specialize, whether it's growth hacking, whether it's campaign marketing, whatever it might be, or the basics of starting up a business. We will then have them priced at affordable prices for 20-somethings, and people can then spend a whole day with these companies that they admire, learning kind of their trade, which they can't really do in London without paying excessive amounts of money. Obviously London is very expensive, so if we can kind of do that middle mark of informing people through our events and giving them insight and inspiration, as well as giving them something more from people within industries that they want to know about, then we'll be really happy.
Amazing. I can see so many parallels to my own journey here. And I just want to kind of sum up what we discussed so far for people listening is, if you have this dream of something different, I wouldn't quit hear me out here. I wouldn't quit and try to do the thing you want to do completely, like 100%. But if it means that you need time to work on that thing, then find work that still pays the bills. And you had to move to a different city, so that I'm imagining it was just cheaper cost of living and that kind of thing. So still bring in some money on the side, even if that's not like exactly the thing you want to be doing, and then build up a skill, and then use that skill to kind of have your your side gig be something more attractive. So you're now doing freelancing instead of a live-in nanny. And that's bringing in money while you still build 20 Mile Club. So I love the sort of evolution, and at the same time, how 20 Mile Club itself is growing. And I'm sure like some things that have happened, you could never have imagined when you got started.
Absolutely. Well, it's great because now we're getting phone calls and emails of people asking, can they join the club? And obviously we're not at that point where we've made it essentially an exclusive club, so you almost have to kind of lie through your teeth and just be like, oh, there's a huge waiting list to get into the club. But long term, we'd love to kind of have the membership in which people can join us, and we would like to offer programs later down the line, but we're just doing stepping stones. And what's really important for the 20 Mile Club is building that 20 Mile Club community, and that's where we think we've actually really hit the nail on the head. People have really bought into the community that we've built. And you can build an online platform, but if you haven't got a community, then I personally think it'll die out pretty quickly.
Definitely. I love that the live events now has become so popular. And has that come mainly through the content side, or have people found out about that another way?
The events that we host?
Yeah.
So we essentially, I really wanted to do an event, and I wanted to tap into a market that I know a lot of people are interested in. So when we initially set up The Honest Truth of setting up a food and drink startup, we advertised it on Eventbrite, and we did marketing through our Facebook page, but essentially it was word of mouth, and it was our community forwarding on our kind of event through newsletters and whatnot. And we literally sold out. The event was only live for about 3.5 weeks, and we sold out 5 days before the event had even gone live. And it just goes to show the power of community, because on the night when obviously we had people on the door, they'd all heard it off the grapevine, and that's great. So for us, we were really, really pleased. But it wasn't a case of kind of paying lots of money to have it advertised everywhere. It was really just word of mouth and people sharing it, which I think is what you want.
Amazing. I have a similar question that I will save for the end, but just before we transition more into the 20 Mile Club stuff here, what do you wish someone had told you when you first started your entrepreneurial venture?
Oh, I wish I hadn't necessarily been so naive in terms of the tech, because I think if you've never gone into tech before, that kind of building of a website, it's very easy to believe anything that you're quoted or told. And I remember being told like a whole host of, you need this and you need that, and because I was so new to the game, I ended up just kind of saying yes and spending a lot of money that I didn't really have either.
Yeah, more months of nannying.
Yeah, I mean, not ideal. But I think it's very easy at the early stages to kind of be taken advantage of. So what I would say is read as much as you can, and as I said earlier, speak to as many people as you can. If someone's quoting you something, or someone's telling you you need to do this, well then go and get a second opinion. It's like going to the doctor. Don't just say yes and walk out the door. Go and find someone else who's kind of worked in a similar industry or is doing something similar to you, and just be like, this is what this person is saying to me. Does this sound legit to you? Mm-hmm. And there's a high chance, they'll be like, no, like run for the hills. But, I just went in a bit blind and just probably said a bit too many yeses to things that I didn't really need.
That's how we learn.
Yeah, there's something I will not be doing again. I think I'm a bit ruthless now, which is good.
Right, cool. I do want to change gears a little bit and focus more on the 20 Mile Club. First of all, like, where did the name come from? And then what is the 20 Mile Club exactly?
Sure. So essentially, the 20 Mile Club to me means, I think the problem is a lot of people look at social media and they think that, you should be following a certain path in your 20s, whether it's to get that job, to, go traveling, to constantly look like you're having an amazing time, basically to look like you're smashing it.
Laptop on the beach.
Yeah, I mean, nannying definitely doesn't pay for that. But essentially, the 20 Mile Club to me is everyone is on their own road. No one follows the same path. Your vehicle of choice, whatever that might be, is gonna get a ruptured tire. It's gonna completely careen totally off track. It's gonna have to do a U-turn, and it's gonna have to, pause for gas. Everyone is going to go on their own 20 mile, and there is no same one. And to me, it's metaphorical, and it means that we're all going to do things differently. So that is, that's what the name means. That. Everyone's on their own 20 mile, and it's kind of an open invitation, and that's why everyone's allowed in the club currently. So that's what it means. And the 20 Mile Club itself, essentially, we find people who've left the confines of a 9 to 5, these amazing 20-somethings, and whether they've set up an app or they're adrenaline junkies or whatever they might be, we kind of ask them the questions that everyone would like to know. So, when you go to a dinner party or, at your drinks party or whatever, and someone walks in and they're doing all these really cool things, but you have no idea how they did it. And, you don't want to bore them to tears by asking them how, when, they've probably had to explain it a million times. And I think a big problem is when you look at successful people now, when they get interviews, no one asks those beginning starter block questions. They're always asking you, oh, what's next? What's been your best moment, or X, Y, and Z? Whereas we're asking them the questions, those kind of beginning questions of how they got there. What was challenging? Did they have to seek out investment? Who did they seek advice from? These are the questions that everyone actually wants to know the answers to. So essentially, that's the foundation of it. And it means that, we can inspire people through other 20-somethings, and also we can give them the tools to understand how they did it. Alongside obviously doing business and lifestyle articles as well, to kind of level everything out.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go for it.
I was going to say it's pretty similar to the mission I had for starting this podcast, which is really cool. And I'm big into collaborating versus competing. So, it sounds like the same kind of thing. Is I said to myself, I'm not going to try and be the expert on every topic. I'm going to get other people on who know more about something than I do. And, through doing that, people will gain more than if I'm just standing up pretending to be an all-knowing expert or guru. I know a part of your content is interviews, and I'd love to hear what have been some of your favorite or most inspirational stories that you featured on the site.
So one of our first stories, this video production company, and he was fabulous because his story was so interesting, because he'd spent 4 years on a fish farm in Norway, which is totally bizarre. And then he moved back to London and set up this video production company, and now goes all over the world doing these videos. So, in terms of a story, that was very impressive. But then, we've loved doing some interviews with there's a amazing florist in London called Freddie's Flowers, and they've become really big in the last year, and hearing his story of how he kind of got everything going was amazing. And kind of again, we strip back that whole polished facade of what it should be. And he had some absolute shockers getting to where he's now got to. So if I'm being really honest, the interviews that stay with me the most are the journeys of how they got there. Not when it's all plain sailing. But to be honest, there've been so many great interviews. I couldn't almost pick a favorite one.
Yeah, and I think it's dangerous when all we see is the highlights reel, because people think that there's something wrong with them if they're not at a certain place at a certain time. Whereas, like you said, everyone's on their own 20 mile. as long as you have the attitude of like, I'm just not going to give up, and you know what it is you're working towards, and you're not going to quit no matter what, no matter how ugly and unsexy that looks along the way. I think that's the main thing that matters. It doesn't matter, you know, if you're still living at home after 2 years, or if you're, on a fish farm for 4 years. It's just a matter of attitude and vision, I think.
I know a story that made me laugh at the start of the year when I'd, just left my nannying job and I'd kind of gone back into freelancing, and I called this guy who just set up his business, and we were having quite a funny conversation because, obviously there is that element of having to fake it till you make it a little bit with everyone. We were having this, very professional chat about everything that he was doing, because I think, it was one of his first interviews. And I said to him, I said, oh, like, where's your office? I can come and meet you, buy you coffee. And there was kind of a bit of a silence on the phone. And he had to then obviously reveal to me that he didn't have an office and he was working from home. And it, it made me laugh, because I was like, don't worry, I'm also working at home. And it was obviously, London, freezing cold January. And I said to him, I was like, don't worry, I've had to open the oven and turn it on to the full heat because it's so unbelievably cold. And, immediately it breaks that kind of barrier, and you realize that you're all in the same boat, and he's trying to make it work and I'm trying to make it work. And, it's that kind of human element that everyone can empathize with. And if you're honest and you can laugh about it, people will remember that. And, we're now 11 months down the line from that moment, and things have completely changed. And I follow his brand online, and things have also completely changed for him. And, it's kind of those low moments, but to give it more perspective later.
I love it. We've spoken a bit about challenges for new entrepreneurs and just getting started. Through the interviews that you've done, what have you found to be some of the most common challenges that new entrepreneurs face today?
Oh, I'd say getting the initial ball rolling for a lot of them has been difficult. I think when you have an idea, it's absolutely great. But then, knowing where to start with that idea, a lot of people find it very difficult. And when you get that initial idea going, as we spoke of earlier, it initially almost starts as a side hustle, because you can't completely throw caution to the wind. There has to be some kind of thought process into how you're gonna keep yourself afloat money wise. So I would say a lot of them say it's that first kind of taking the plunge and knowing where to start, that they've found quite difficult. And also I think it's taking the courage to then obviously leave a career for a not so glamorous career in order to do your side hustle.
Yep.
But you know what? Everyone has done it. They've stuck to their guns, and a lot of the guys that we've interviewed, guys and girls, they've it's come good for them, which is awesome.
Yeah, I don't know if you'd have any experience to speak about this question, but if for people listening, how can you tell the difference between whether something is just a good idea, or if it's actually if it's just an idea, or if it's something really worth pursuing? I wonder if you have any input on that.
So when I think it's that whole element of the good idea criteria, like, who other than you, who else is going to think that it's a good idea? And like, how do you then find out whether other people find it's a good idea? And it sounds kind of very basic, but going back to basics and doing a survey, framing the questions, seeing if it's a need, seeing if it's a want, seeing if there's a gap in the market for what you're trying to do, and like reach out to your your kind of the demographic of age group that you're after. And it's so easy now with social media anyway. You can just post a survey online and you can get over 150 responses, and you only need over half to think it's a good idea for you to be like, okay, I'm now gonna pursue this. I think people put a lot of pressure on themselves, but if you just take the right steps to kind of find out standard market research, whether, other people will be invested into it, then great.
Got it. Charlotte, is there anything else you feel is worth mentioning for people listening that we haven't touched on yet?
I think if I'm going to be really honest, if you're ever having moments of doubt, or you feel like you don't know what you're doing, it's completely normal to feel like that. And even if it looks like everyone is nailing it and everyone's having a complete whale of a time, the chances are they're also looking into their bowl of cornflakes in the morning being like, what am I doing? And that is totally normal, and it's not a weakness at all. It's just at this kind of moment in our lives, it's such a time of change. And so I'd say, don't worry about it, don't stress about it, everything is going to be okay. It doesn't matter if you go for different jobs or careers, or trying to go into setting up your own business and it's not working. You still have so much time left to make something else work. So don't worry about it.
Yeah, and a vulnerable share from my side is there's not many days that go by where I don't think like, this is all just going to implode and I'm going to have to go get a normal job again. And
on a regular basis, I think
totally,
that it's
totally.
I still, my poor mother, I still call her, and she is honestly like an informal therapist to me. And I think she's going to start charging me soon, because I call her at least 3 times a week to be like, I just don't know if I'm doing this right. And she's like, you're doing it right. It's fine. And I think everyone thinks like that, and it's totally normal. So just crack on and just keep doing what you're doing. And if you're doing something that isn't making you happy, then I'd definitely go about changing it.
Totally.
Because there's no point not being happy. So yeah,
totally.
Make the changes.
Charlotte, I do want to be mindful of the time here, but before we wrap up, I've got some quick fire questions. So just whatever comes first to mind. What do you wish you'd been told in your 20s? Well, early in your 20s.
What do I wish I'd been told in my early 20s? I wish that someone told me from the get-go that everything was going to be okay. And also, I wish that I hadn't felt so pressured to get a job when I first left university.
Big one. What is the biggest opportunity for quarter lifers or 20 milers today?
To be honest, there is so many things that we can now do. It's not as limiting as it once was. And, if everything's online, if you look for your kind of dream role or a dream area that you kind of want to work in, or whatever that might be, you can find it. So I'd say, or make it up, do your own version of the 20 Mile Club. Like, you can, there will be, if it's an interest to you, and your friends can relate to it, there'll be something for you. I think you have to make your own opportunities. Don't rely on anyone else, and just ignore kind of any negative noise that you can.
I love it. Yeah, on the topic of making it up, there was actually, I think I shared this on a recent episode. I came across a girl on Instagram who she's got agoraphobia, which is the fear of leaving the house. And she's now she's been featured in galleries for her travel photography. And she's never taken pictures, never used a professional camera or left the house. But what she does is she goes on Google Street View all over the world and takes pictures of things on Google Street View. And she's now got an exhibition in a gallery.
Perfect.
She sells prints, and it's insane.
God, that's the way to do it, isn't it?
Yeah. Cool. Well, Charlotte, I do want to, I've got one more question, sorry. And before I get to that, where can people go to find out more about you and the 20 Mile Club and everything else that you've got going on, including The Honest Truth?
So the 20 Mile Club, obviously we have our own, and we have a Facebook and an Instagram that you can find, at 20mileclub.com. All our events get posted on there. If you're in London, we have our events featured on Eventbrite, hoping in the not so distant future, we'll start kind of moving out the UK and doing events kind of all over. I mean, that would be the dream. So yeah, just follow us, join our community, and it's only going to, keep getting bigger. And hopefully we can, give you some insight and inspire you along the way. And hopefully you'll stay with us for a very long time.
It will be well worth it. I love your guys' content. And before I get to the final question, I actually just want to take a second to acknowledge you for not only coming on and sharing your story and your expertise with us, but for making that decision that this is what you wanted to create and help other people make that transition themselves from the 9-to-5 world to being self-employed, and providing the tools and the resources for them to do so. And just like taking a chance on yourself and doing what needed to be done, moving from London to becoming a nanny in the middle of nowhere, it takes a lot of guts and a lot of courage to face up to people who would say all sorts of things, but you did that and it's paying off now. And it says a lot about you and your character. So the final question that I do have is, what one thing can listeners do this week to start creating their own quarter life comeback?
What can you do? I think the thing you can do is by being proactive. I think it's very easy to sit there and wish and hope and think of all the things you could be doing or the things that you'd like to be doing. But essentially, you're only going to start making changes if you are actually proactive about it. So, start getting on the phone, start looking online. There's so much out there. If you don't want to do what you're doing, then do something about it, because you don't want to get, halfway into your 30s or 40s or 50s and regret it. And, so many people say that. We interview people no longer in their 20s and they always make reference to the, all the years, the kind of peak years of their lives, all the things that they wish they'd done. So the one thing I would say is be proactive, and if it's bothering you, do something about it.
Charlotte Moncrieff, thank you so much for coming on the Quarter Life Comeback.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great.
So there you have it, guys and girls. That wraps up this week's episode of the Quarter Life Comeback podcast, episode 92. And a big thanks to Charlotte Moncrieff for coming on the show and sharing her story with us today. If you like this one, please share it around with your friends on social media and shoot me a tweet at Bryan Teare to let me know your biggest takeaway. For me, it was the thing we spoke about with Charlotte, which was your journey is not going to look the same as anybody else's. So don't worry about it not looking how you think it should look at a certain time, but just focus on what it is that you're working towards and the actions that you are taking, and not what the results are that you are getting. As always, you can get the links and resources we mentioned in this episode at bryanteare.com/092, and make sure you head on over to quarterlifecomeback.com to subscribe to get all these episodes as soon as they go live, as well as stuff I only share with email subscribers. Thank you so much for being here again. I appreciate you more than you know. And until next week, guys, keep creating your quarter life comeback.